Good morning. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to the neighborhood of Little Brook and to the Lake City Collective's gathering space called Kwe Kwo, which means little water in Luchutsit, the language of the interior coast Salish, the traditional stewards of this unceded land we occupy today. Our multicultural group started a few years ago with co-founder Peggy Hernandez when we saw the need for the diverse underrepresented communities in the North End, excuse me, to have a voice, as well as access to opportunities and infrastructure people in other neighborhoods take for granted, such as traffic calming, a clean park, financial stability, and a bright future for our kids. Then, early in 2020, we were fortunate enough to have received the EDI Capacity Building Grant, which allowed us to lease a space next door. As we were planning our official grand opening, the pandemic hit. And having this space made possible for us to serve our communities as far as South Snohomish as a mutual aid hub at a time when community and service centers or other agencies remain closed. Out of this modest but mighty center, we distributed from school homework to library books to PPE supplies, and even built 2 community gardens. We have also signed up hundreds in emergency and food assistance programs and provided language support to businesses in 5 languages. All this thanks to our staff and volunteers and partnership with almost every city department. We have also organized 3 community vaccination events here. In fact, several Seattle Fire Department staffs said these were the best organized event they had seen. To this date, around 1,200 North Seattle residents have had the COVID-19 vaccine through our work, something we feel proud of, and that has allowed us to safely organize outdoor events in our community. Thank you. Thank you. Unfortunately, this work has had low points too, as we witness many people getting sick around us, who even call us while struggling to breathe. Sadly, relatives and people we know died during this time too. Similarly, we saw hundreds of people losing their income, especially affecting those living paycheck to paycheck, who didn't have the option to work from home. Remember, not everyone had access to paid leave or unemployment benefits. Lake City Collective is thankful to Mayor Durkan, the council, and the city of Seattle through departments like OIRA for recognizing those neighbors who, before the pandemic, contributed with their hands to the economy of our city, and now need a lifeline to keep them afloat in one of the most expensive cities in the country. With city programs like the Seattle Relief Fund, you are sending a clear message to our communities that you care about them, our most vulnerable residents, and we are happy to be a partner with you in this endeavor. Mayor Durkan and city staff, we welcome you to our home. This moment has a lot of meaning to us after a long and tiring 19 months we all had. And I think it's fair to say that the Lake City Collective Kwe Kwo Center is now finally officially open.
Yay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Cesar, thank you so much for the warm welcome, and so thank you for introducing me to the folks next door. From the very first time, even before I was mayor, when I met Cesar, he had a strong vision about what Lake City needed and how the Lake City Collective could actually make a difference. And we worked with him and partnered with him, and he just kept going. So thank you and for all your team. When I came in as mayor, I knew that Seattle had shifted too much to being a top-down city. And somehow things started in City Hall and then had to be interposed. And I worked really hard in those first 2 years to say, no, let's reverse that. Be it community-based up. Then the pandemic hit, and we learned more than ever before how important it was to have deep community connections. And we've seen that some of our greatest successes through the pandemic, through the civil rights reckoning, and through the hard times we've had over these last 20 months have come because of community, because community-based organizations who are closest to the people know what they need and are there to do it, sometimes themselves struggling through so much. For the past 20 months, we really have faced just unprecedented challenges here in the city of Seattle. We were the first into COVID. There was no roadmap, no handbook, and we really had to make our own way. And we did it without very little assistance, and in fact, sometimes opposition from our then president. But we kept going. But we saw that Seattle, which was already facing so many disparities, that those disparities were accentuated during COVID, and that the communities hardest hit by the economic impacts and by the health impacts were our communities of color. And today we know that as we start to recover, that the people who were struggling and had a hard time before still do. And they're not yet recovering. They still need so much help and assistance, which is why I am so proud to be able to announce that we are providing $16 million in cash assistance to our neighbors through the Seattle Relief Fund. And as I came in here, we were talking about how hard it's been for people, but there's so many people in communities have a harder time, more barriers to access programs, either because they don't speak the language, because they think their undocumented status might stop them, they're afraid to ask for help, or they don't know how to ask for help, which is why we have to make this as barrier-free as possible. I really want to thank Ku and your whole team throughout this pandemic, doing so much to reach into our immigrant and refugee communities. And I know you've done it with Kid at Home and everything else. Thank you for that. And Tanya, the work that HSD has done has been remarkable. We have seen through our hardest months that the most vulnerable have been hit the most, and you guys keep showing up. And our partnership with Seattle Public Schools is as important as it can be, because we know that if our kids are safe and healthy, our communities can be safe and healthy. So through this relief fund, Seattle residents and workers and students can get up to $1,000 per individual or up to $3,000 per household. We have an application process that will be available in many languages, and Ku will describe kind of how the process works, but we want to make this as easy as possible for everyone. At the very beginning, we saw some of the first businesses to fail were our small businesses, and as a result, it was their workers who were displaced. And we stepped in as quickly as we could with 1,500 small business stabilization grants. We did a second round recently, and we were just trying to keep enough people afloat till the federal money could come in. To date, 66% of all grantees from our high displaced or disadvantaged neighborhoods, 66% come from the people who need it most. 60% of recipients identify as from our BIPOC communities. And over 20% went to business owners whose primary language is not English. That shows that Seattle can lead, can make sure that we serve all of community. This is going to be another round of funding that we really want to get to the people that need it most. We know that all too well that before the pandemic hit, that we had those disparities I talked to, particularly less opportunity and less resources to our communities of color. That's why I committed as mayor to fund $100 million specifically to serving those communities that have been left behind by systemic racism, and funded it again in this year's budget. I'm going to urge whoever the new mayor is to keep doing that for at least 10 years. We know that at a minimum we need to start funding community and community-based organizations that are closest to communities. The safest community is a community that has access to good health care, affordable housing, jobs, and good economic opportunity, as well as educational justice. So I'm so proud with the Seattle Relief Fund that this $16 million can continue to be a lifeline for people who are still struggling. We know many people are still barely hanging on. And we want, as we come out into the next phase and finally can start really recovering from this pandemic, that we don't leave anybody behind. So I won't go through all the details right now on what you have to be eligible. They'll be on our website. Ku will talk about those a little bit. But we want to make this as easy as possible for people and open it up to everyone from our Seattle Promise students to artists who've been trying to make a go here in Seattle, to anyone who lives in the boundaries of the city of Seattle who qualifies for this help. I would really want to emphasize, accepting this award does not do anything to impact your eligibility for other benefits or your eligibility and your status in the United States. For residents who don't speak English, we're going to reach out in multiple languages so that people can know what they're eligible for. And we're going to try to get it as quickly as we can with the help of the community-based organizations, because that's who people know and trust. And we have found, from vaccinations to business stabilization to all the other programs, when we empower the community-based organizations, we get the best response. These are not a first come, first serve. We're really going to be looking at how we get it in the hands of the people who need it most. I have to thank all the community partners, the ones who are here, but the ones who aren't here across this city. It is, as I said, been the hardest 20 months in this city. And those community-based organizations, many of them were already struggling themselves as nonprofits, hand-to-mouth, underpaid, day by day, and their workloads went up enormously. And they all try to roll up their sleeves and figure out ways they could continue to help their communities. And I really want to thank them, because today the city of Seattle is better off because of the work of the community-based organizations. I'm now going to turn it over to, And we got great things happening. I was just, I was in Rainier Valley last week with the head of the the Small Business Administration, the Biden administration, and she was amazed at all that was happening, from the Ethiopian Community Center, which is actually coming out of the ground, the housing there, to the Muslim Housing Association, which is it's building its housing, to all the stuff that's around Graham Station, to what's happening here in Lake City. So even while these dark days, people just kept going, and we have a lot of great stuff coming on. I next want to turn it over to my Director of Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs, who has been so terrific through this. She really has, double time worked, and I want to thank her for her work, but also I have to thank you again for everything HSD has done, and you stepping into that role has been tremendous. So, Ku, the stage is yours now.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning. I'm Ku. I'm the Director of the Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs. I have had the great pleasure of working so closely over the past few months with Tanya and her team at HSD, the Office of Arts and Culture, and the Mayor's Office, obviously, and the Council, as well as the dedicated and passionate community leaders. David from Scholarship Junkies, who, if you ask the right questions, he'll be able to answer them. Cesár, Sophia, so many who are not here today. As the mayor said, it took all of us to create and launch this program. So I've been thinking about these days that it's easy to dismiss the effectiveness of government, easy to put us down, and no matter what level, whether it's state or federal or, in this case, municipalities. But I'm here to say that this Seattle Relief Fund process exemplifies the best of how government can work together in partnership with community to make something truly positive happen. And we even have tech organizations, and we spent long nights, let me tell you, and a whole lot of emails, Zoom and Teams calls to design a program from scratch, an outreach process. And so everything that we have built today has been in conversation with community to make it reflect community priorities so that we can truly help our most vulnerable neighbors and friends. In fact, I will also say that despite whatever negative news about COVID is in the national press these days, I have a lot of hope. And I say this as someone who just a year ago, actually 19 months, right, wondered how we were going to come out of this pandemic. I have hope because I've been so incredibly inspired by our community organizations coming together. We were tired. We're all tired. We're still tired, bone tired. But each and every partner still showed up to help so many people. In my job, I do get to have a weekend more often than not, but with Peggy and Cesár and so many of our community partners, these clinics have been happening on weekends, and so there is no rest. And for that, we are so grateful. And it's not just the community, even us in government, whatever silos may have existed before, boy, do we blow those up, right, Tanya? And so it feels like, for as hard as the challenges that we've endured, we've also created a new era of departments who are excited and energized to collaborate for the common cause of helping those who suffer the generational scars of historical racism, xenophobia, and colonialism. So it is hard work helping each other and lifting up our communities. that to me is the promise of America. And that to me is not just the values of Seattle, but the true American values of helping out our community and your neighbors. In 1975, I came here as a refugee from Vietnam, and my family came here with just a plastic bag of family photos, which are the only photos that I have of my father, who we lost at the end of the war. But thanks to the kindness of Washington and elected leaders who took to heart the words engraved on the Statue of Liberty, "From her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome," we received assistance and were able to adjust to our new home and eventually give back to our community. We hope the Seattle Relief Fund will be a helpful boost for those Seattle residents who have been impacted by this ongoing pandemic and who need assistance to bounce back. And we hope that this assistance is able to help many get back to stability so that, like my family, they're able to adjust to this new normal and care for themselves and their loved ones. I encourage anyone listening and watching to please help us with outreach for the Seattle Relief Fund. We have the program information and application translated into Amharic, simplified in traditional Chinese, Korean, Somali, Spanish, Tagalog, and Vietnamese. And we have committed and hardworking community-based organizations ready to help, whether over the phone or in person. The website is really easy to remember, seattle.relief.com. Again, that's seattle.relief.com. And funds are available, as the mayor mentioned, regardless of your immigration status or citizenship status, as long as you meet all other eligibility requirements. I truly thank the mayor, council, our community partners for assuring these funds help families most in need, and we're proud to once again partner with our community partners who've been at the front lines, never resting, and helping individuals during the past year and a half. Thank you. It is now my pleasure to introduce Violet Lavatai for APICAT for Health.
Thank you, Ko. Yes, my name is Violet Lavatai. I'm representing APICAT Health. I am excited to be here today when the Seattle Relief funding came in. This is what working on the ground with families and every day, day in, day out, this is what we actually need. I'm going to take off myself. And so our coalition, APICAT's coalition, is building capacity as a coalition on addressing health-related crises. COVID has been a huge issue for varying reasons in both Asian and Pacific Islander communities. We appreciate the cities. Thank you, Mayor Durkan, for the investment. Not an investment in not only in the city, but in people, in the community who needs this funding as we speak. I think right now everybody thinks 16 million, what would it do? It would help many families who are struggling as we speak. We are not still out of the woods of COVID, and so this funding can help with food, sometimes help with even the bare necessities that they want to live on. Additionally, we're grateful that the mayor and city council and the city of Seattle has made this a low barrier, and it has increased accessibility to everyone. And the thing is, we've seen in the past where funding would come in and communities had no access to it because there were many loopholes. With this accessibility and the low barriers, there are many families who can apply. And so this is not jumping through hoops. This is not people saying, how can I get this funding? There was so many questions. This actually, because I've seen the actual application, I was so happy to see that, because this tells me that we're going to be serving a lot of people, and the need is great. The initial response has been tremendous as working with families on the ground every day. And in the short time of this announcement, so we're going to be busy. We're going to be busy handing this out to people who really are in need. APICAT, as a coalition, we are working across the lines of City of Seattle. And this is also great for the City of Seattle to be actually a role model for other cities that can help other communities in different cities. So we're grateful to the mayor. We're grateful for this funding. And I can tell you, this funding will help many people. I've seen it. I mean, I've seen people say, I can't even afford to buy a loaf of bread. Now, just imagine if they have the ability to apply to this, that $1,000 would bring in maybe Thanksgiving dinner for next month. So we're appreciative of this funding. This funding will be helping a lot of people, and we're appreciative of Mayor Durkan making sure that this is what it's all about, is getting the help that they need to the community and for the community. Thank you very much. And I'm going to introduce our next speaker, who is Sophia Bonafall. She's the Executive Director of the Ethiopian community in Seattle. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Violet. ECS has been supporting the Ethiopian and East African community for more than 30 years in various ways. ECS helps community members address immediate needs like housing, employment, or accessing health needs through helping them navigate the complex web of social services. This can be hard and for some even impossible to navigate, especially when you're facing linguistic and cultural barriers. At the start of the pandemic, we saw immediately that our community has been disproportionately affected by the financial, health, and social effects of COVID-19. ECS thus was at the forefront of the COVID-19 response. Throughout the pandemic, we shared information to the community on safety measures, testing, vaccination, and grant and financial assistance. But with the grant and the financial assistance, we did not stop at informing. We had to help the community fill out the complex application forms. So that meant working with the communities to fill forms, to upload required IDs or whatever they need to do. We helped them. We collaborated with the city throughout the pandemic. We worked closely with the Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs to ensure equitable COVID-19 vaccine distribution. At a time when it was simply impossible to access the vaccines, we worked with the city to have 300 community members vaccinated at ECS, and most of these were seniors. We also registered thousands of community members for appointments at the City of Seattle vaccination sites. With the support of the city, we have a COVID-19 vaccination hotline, and community members can call this number and they can access information in Amharic. Last year, we collaborated again with OIRA to ensure that our community access to the COVID-19 Disaster Relief Fund. That really made a difference for so many in our community. The fund was especially critical to those who received it, as they did not get any financial assistance from unemployment or from the federal stimulus checks. Two individuals I know personally bought the basic necessities. One bought food and clothing for her son, while the other just bought groceries to take him over for a few months. That's why we are really proud to partner with the city again to ensure that our most vulnerable community members are able to access this helpful financial aid. We know that many in our community need this help now. Our vision for the future is to have a strong community who can access the various opportunities that Seattle and Washington offer. This will mean that we will need to continue working on those factors that affect the upward social and economic mobility of our community: education, housing, health, and employment. We also want to engage more on advocacy to address the root causes that cut across these areas: structural and systemic racism. We really do not want the community to be in the same place when the next pandemic hits. I would like now to pass the microphone back to Mayor Durkan. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of you, and to Tanya. And you guys didn't speak as well as the people who came for this. I think it's, we don't realize sometimes how just having access to a small amount of money in a critical time can change the trajectory of a family, for them, for their children. And we also don't realize sometimes that, particularly for our newest immigrant and refugees in our country, while they're still trying to establish themselves here, they often have family back in their other home countries that are struggling too, and they're torn between worlds. And if you just look at the headlines today, it impacts so many of our Seattle residents, whether it's the wars in Ethiopia and Somalia or the rise of COVID in India. People really are feeling many things, and so having this kind of relief fund is so critical to really saying that Seattle is a place for everyone, and that we are going to do all we can to overcome our history of structural racism and really make this a place where every kid has an opportunity and every family has the ability not just to survive, but actually do well. And so if there's any questions people have for me or anyone else up here, let's stick to the relief fund first, and then if people have questions on other topics, we'll move to that second.
So how is this program paid for? Does it come out of the general fund?
Yes. And we had budgeted this. I want to be remiss too, you heard it up here, but want to thank the council for passing this appropriation. Very early on, this is one of the areas where council and I were able to get quickly and agree on structural package after package on what we needed for relief for the people of Seattle. All right, any questions on any other issues? Perfect. Thank you so much for coming, everybody. Thank you for all your work, everybody.